I really try to look back at my own metrics as often as like reasonably possible. I don't do it like every day, but I do try to really compare myself to, for example, like last year and then the year before when I had very different business models. And by all metrics, I'm like absolutely light years ahead of where I was.
That was Nora Schlesinger, and this is episode number 179 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey there, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me here today. I am so glad that you're here, tuned in to the Chopped Podcast. You know, this podcast is, I don't know, I like to think of it as chopping things up a little bit, you know, like we do in the kitchen. Chop, chop, chop. You can't see me, but I'm doing my chop hands. But we're chopping up things like what we do with business and blogging and even our emotions sometimes, right? So yeah, we're here talking about blogging, recipes, social media, being an influencer, being a business owner, and so much more. So today I'm talking with Nora Schlesinger. She's of the site A Clean Bake, and let me tell you, you are in for a real treat today. We are talking about everything from food allergies and how that impacts you as a blogger to how you can offer value in this whole, what feels like a very saturated world of recipes. Also to the main topic, which is downsizing your blog. I know that sounds crazy, downsizing your blog, but this is something that Nora purposefully went through with her food blog. I think it kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. It's easy to want to try to be everything to everybody, right? Because, you know, it's understandable. We get out there. I am guilty of this myself. It's the comparison game. I see somebody doing a recipe and I think I could do that recipe, or I see somebody doing something on social media and I think, oh, I could do that on social media. And the next thing you know, it's almost like, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with this term in business. It's called scope creep. So we end up with scope creep in our blog. And interestingly enough, Nora's background is as a brand consultant. How perfect is that? So she would actually go in and do some marketing research, and then she would talk to brands about, you know, what their message is and how they could better reach out to the audience that they're trying to reach to. I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to do as food bloggers? I think it is totally, you know, what our goal is to put the content out there that best impacts the people we want to reach. And what I got from Nora is that she was able to figure that out by downsizing her blog. I imagine that I know what you're thinking, like downsizing, what? But in reality, if you're thinking downsizing means like reducing traffic, what Nora found was actually the opposite, that by being more purposeful about the things that she was doing with her blog, whether it was the new content she was publishing or the old content she was updating or how she was sharing that on social media, it had an impact that was different than what you would expect, right? You might expect that she might have less traffic, but actually she found the opposite to be true. And I think there's a lot to be said for doing more by doing less and actually having more time in your life. And so Nora goes into the strategies of exactly how she downsized her site and the work that she was doing to support that site. I love it so much. I love even how part of her strategy was actually to get a job and let her blog be what she refers to as a professional hobby. How perfect is that? I love that terminology because it's not like, you know, any old hobby that you might do. It's not like, you know, you're doing paintings on the weekends or, you know, things like that. Those are great. I think it's wonderful to have completely relaxed hobbies, but for her, she looks at it as a professional hobby, and I absolutely love that terminology. I think it's something we can all embrace on all levels of the spectrum. I had such a great time talking with Nora. I think you're going to hear how genuine she is and how transparent she is in sharing what she's gone through and the struggles that she's experienced and the strategies that she's purposefully following to grow her site in a very non-cluttered kind of way. I absolutely love this conversation. I think you're going to love it too. So let's get straight to it. Here's today's featured interview with Nora Schlesinger. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Nora Schlesinger. She's of the site A Clean Bake, and she is on the show today. Hey Nora, welcome to the Chop Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. First of all, you're friends with Kara, and so it makes me feel a little bit like, like degree removed from
Right.
Kara.
I know. I feel like I almost know you just sort of by the transitive property.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or like, besties in some sort of,
Yeah.
universe, I guess.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's nice to finally have a chance to talk.
Yeah, I'm so glad for this too. I think we're going to have a great conversation. We communicated by email a little while ago, and I have been looking forward to our conversation ever since.
Great. Me too.
Good. Well, I think today's discussion is going to be like poof, mind blowing for a lot of people, and I'm so excited. But before we get into all that, I want to start with this one question, and that is, Nora, you are with the site of Clean Bake. What was it that caused you to start your blog?
Oh, wow. Well, that's sort of a long story, but I'll try to keep it brief. I have been really interested in cooking, specifically baking and photography for pretty much my whole life.
Hmm.
I started blogging, food blogging, gosh, back 2007 or something. And I stopped for a while and I started back up after grad school was over. I did grad school in the evenings and weekends while working. So when it was
Wow.
over, I was kind of like, what do I do with all this free time?
I
So
know.
I had literally forgotten how to relax. So I started blogging and I had been baking for all my friends in grad school. So I just started sort of posting the recipes and the little tweaks that I was making and things. And it was just sort of your like typical conventional baking blog.
Yeah.
About a year later, I realized I had been having these digestive issues and just sort of overall, like, I guess, sort of just like systematic health issues. I just kind of felt off and icky all the time. And I thought that it was stress related and that it would go away when I finished grad school because that was a really grueling program. And I had a very high stress job and I was doing it all at once. And it was, physically very taxing. Um, and not to mention mentally. And these symptoms didn't go away. In fact, they got worse. So, about a year after I started my conventional baking blog, I decided I was going to have to make some dietary changes, and it was going to be very hard to continue to bake with butter and sugar and wheat flour and things. But I really enjoyed blogging, and so I started a clean bake, honestly, as sort of like a temporary outlet. Um, Fully intending to go back to my conventional baking blog once my kind of detox or whatever you want to call it, my like what I thought was a temporary dietary change was over. And really long story short, I never went back. I closed down the original conventional baking blog. When I say conventional, I mean, like white sugar, white flour,
Yes.
butter, things like that. Traditional baking, whatever you want to call it. And I continued with a clean bake for a couple of reasons. The first was because I never changed my diet back, and because the healing and sort of like the process of getting myself back to a state of health and wellness took much, much longer and was much more intensive than I expected or hoped. And also because when I started a clean bake, I started realizing that there's this population of people that are just suffering in silence. They have digestive issues, they have inflammation issues, they maybe have like chronic headaches, all these sort of like ways that their body is saying, like, hey, red flag, something's wrong. And they have to change their diets, but they don't really know how to enjoy food without, what I call conventional ingredients like gluten, dairy, sugar, processed foods, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So cooking is very daunting for people who are forced to take, staple ingredients out of their diet. And more so kind of like socializing, so entertaining, either hosting or attending a party or holidays or any of these like social activities or events that revolve around food are really, really difficult when you can't eat what everyone else is eating. And it makes you feel well, first of all, it makes you hungry because
Yes.
you all you can eat are like the carrot sticks, you know. But it really makes you feel like an outsider and kind of like a freak, or at least it made me feel like kind of like a freak, you know.
Yeah, because
Um,
food is like, central to
it's so
social
important.
activities.
Absolutely. And when
Yeah.
you're sitting like the image that I always think of, and this is like a real thing that actually happened, was, you know, you're at Thanksgiving and on your plate there's like a sad little pile of dry turkey and like maybe a little bit of mashed potatoes, even though you know that you're going to get a stomach ache later. And everybody else has these plates just heaping high with all this beautiful food, but it's all covered in cheese and butter and, you know, held together with breadcrumbs and things like that. And then like you can't have dessert when everyone else is having dessert. It's just, oh, it's so depressing. And you don't want to feel like a charity case. You know, you don't want everyone to have to make strange food and go out of their way to make food that you can eat, but at the same time you can't eat the food that everyone else is eating without getting sick. So um it wasn't just me. There, you know, there were people who were coming out of the woodwork, like people I knew, people I didn't know, were coming to me and saying like, I have this experience, you know, and I was able to enjoy my birthday cake, like actually eat my own birthday cake for the first time in years, things like that. And I realized that I think maybe this was my purpose. I think that the original blog, the conventional baking blog, was fun and it was a really great creative outlet for me, but I always struggled with like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Like, what am I offering that no one else is offering? Nothing. It was just fun for me, but it wasn't really like, there was no real purpose to it beyond like, look at my pictures of donuts. And then when I started a clean bake, all of a sudden it was like I had a purpose. All this work was for something, for someone's, and it was really helping people. And it was honestly like it was helping people deal with something that not a lot of people talk about, which is how do you choose between being sick or being social and like being, you know, participating in a social gathering that revolves around food.
Well, yeah, that
And
and also being hungry, right? I mean,
yeah,
because you've got to eat.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're going to Thanksgiving, for example, you know, you don't really want to bring your own dinner, although I have done that too. Um,
I do that actually all the time,
do
but
you?
yeah. Yeah.
It got to the point where I would just like make pretty much a whole dinner and, you know,
Yeah.
bring like 5 different things. But it does help to be able, well, so actually, like I joke about that, but I also recognize that I am in a position where like I know how to do that and not everybody
Right.
does. A
Yes.
lot of people may not be confident in the kitchen or honestly just may not have the first idea of where to start if you have to eliminate gluten, dairy, sugar, soy, the list goes on, you know. If you can't like open a can of the cranberry sauce that you grew up eating, then what do you do, you know?
Right.
So if you're not in the position to like just whip out, you know, a whole Thanksgiving meal that's you know, in line with your dietary needs, it it's really like I feel like my purpose to kind of be able to say, here, I got you covered. Here's like a 15-minute cranberry sauce recipe, and here's like a really easy stuffing recipe, and here's a, you know, gluten-free and dairy-free cornbread recipe. Um, so
Which is probably where the stuffing recipe comes from, right?
yeah,
You got to start with the
actually
cornbread.
no, the stuffing is entirely grain-free, believe it or not.
Wow.
Um,
That's amazing.
So, and but I should mention that not all of my recipes are for Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's
I do
good to
have a
know.
lot. I
Hey,
feel like all I'm
I
talking about is
there's
Thanksgiving.
a lot in there I want to kind of unpack a little bit. So
Mhm.
what was your master's degree in?
Business. I
Oh, you
got
and I
my
are the same
MBA.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I was a consultant, and I did my MBA evenings and weekends.
So
insanity.
I got my MBA, but I went full time. I was a newly single mother at the time, and I just decided that to get away would be really good for me. So
Yeah.
I moved to Columbia, which is like 2 hours from here, and I went to University of Missouri. So I
Oh,
went to
wow.
graduate school full time, but my undergraduate I did part time while I worked a full time job, and I can feel what you went through. It's very stressful.
It's very stressful. Yeah.
Yes,
There was a lot of sitting in hotel because I traveled a lot as part of my consulting job. There was
yes.
a lot of sitting in hotels late at night,
Oh,
sitting, finding like a corner of an airport that had an outlet for my laptop and panicking because
yes.
I had just given a presentation and then hadn't had time to study for my midterm the next day.
Oh,
It was brutal. I mean,
yeah.
it was hard.
It is, I just feel for you. And so you started having these health problems, and I could totally understand why you thought that that was related to the stress of school and a job. But I'm curious what it was that caused you to say, "Okay, I got to give up these things." You did you experiment, or did you go to a doctor, or some? How did you find out that these are the things you had to give up?
There wasn't really a single turning point. There were a couple of people and sort of events in my life that inspired me to make a change. The first one was a friend of mine who, back in high school, actually, he's been a friend for a really long time. He had cancer, and he's healthy now, thank God. But one of the side effects of all the treatment that he had for his cancer was he developed some digestive issues, and he went through um, a lot of agonizing years of not really knowing what was going on and what was triggering it until he finally cut out gluten and dairy. Um, and one day I was telling him, about some of the symptoms that I was experiencing. And he said, like, oh, that sounds a lot like what I went through, what I was experiencing back before I cut out gluten and dairy. So that inspired me to cut out gluten and dairy. I saw some improvement, but not a ton. And I was still continuing to react to things that I couldn't figure out why I was reacting to because I wasn't eating gluten or dairy. So, kind of what else could it be? I had another really good friend who also happened to be my neighbor who we sort of were talking, and I don't remember like how exactly it came out, but we discovered that we both had a similar experience. We were both sort of experiencing these inexplicable digestive problems and a lot of like weird pain and weird symptoms. And they weren't really being helped by, I'm air quoting, just cutting out gluten and dairy. Not that that's an easy thing to do in and of itself,
Hmm.
but she had found this doctor who was a little off the beaten path. Like not like crazy, but she was an MD, but she was an integrative medicine
Yes. Uh-huh.
practitioner.
Hmm.
So basically, at that point, I was like, I'll try anything because
Yeah.
I had been going to a conventional. I don't know. I mean, I call everything conventional, but like a normal general practitioner who was like, well, I can't help you. I mean, she literally said, well, I can't help you, and referred me to who I thought was an integrative practitioner. And he said, here, take these pills. And I'm like, well, the pills didn't do anything. It was an antibiotic and it just like didn't do anything. It probably in retrospect made it worse.
Mm.
Um, and my friend Katie said, I'm starting to see this doctor. I don't remember what sold me. Probably I was just so desperate at that point. I would have seen any doctor that, could have possibly helped. But so I went to this new doctor and she was amazing. I mean, she and her entire practice changed my life. Um, they kind of connect you in with not just a medical doctor, but also I saw a nutritionist, a dietitian who also specialized in Chinese medicine. So I did a lot of Chinese herbs actually,
Mm.
which like 5 years ago I would have been like, sucker.
Yeah.
But honest to God, like the Chinese herbs were life changing. And then I also started doing acupuncture and all the sort of, this, my friend Katie, who introduced me to this doctor, she calls it woo woo stuff. Um,
Yes.
and, I just started honestly changing my diet, but also changing my life and addressing stress and addressing sleep and addressing all of the different components of your lifestyle that take a toll on your body. Um, the biggest, I think, motivator for me was that shortly after I graduated from business school, I got engaged, and I had had so many horrible days. And I just thought, I have no control over my body and my, how good I feel. What if that happens on my wedding? Like I hopefully only get one wedding day.
Yes.
And I don't want to go through the whole day not really caring about it and not really taking it in or enjoying it, because all I want to do is crawl back into bed because I feel so horrible. And there had been so many days like that I was just terrified that I was basically going to like miss my wedding day. So that really motivated me to take whatever extreme measures I had to take to get better. I put myself on a very restrictive diet. I mean, in partnership with doctors, and stuck to it and was able to have a really great day at my wedding. And then the next day, because at your wedding, you don't actually eat anything because
Yeah.
there's no time. So they had packaged up a slice of cake for me. And the next day I ate it and I was sick for like 3 days. I
Oh
mean,
my
it was,
goodness.
totally normal wheat and butter and all
Yes.
that cake. So then I thought, okay, well, I guess this isn't over yet. So I kept going. I kept, um, you know, examining my diet and what I was eating and how that was connected to how I was feeling, and just like very slowly kept going, kept sticking
Yes.
to the regimen.
Right.
And it was just this rabbit hole. That's why I say there wasn't really like a turning point. It's been a really long process, and it's one that I'm still kind of exploring and still trying to figure out what I can reintroduce, what foods I can reintroduce.
Exactly. So
Um,
what year then did you start a clean bake as part of this process?
that would be 2014 was when like March of 2014 was when I started a clean bake. So near the beginning of 2014 was when I really started changing my diet.
And by this point, I was just going to ask you that by this point you had already pretty much you knew what you were going to be doing with your diet, or were you still kind of experimenting?
I was sort of starting to experiment. So that was before I started seeing the really effective doctor. That happened
Uh,
later that year. At that point, I was still like, okay, I guess I have to take control of this situation. I'm going to cut out gluten and dairy. I'm going to look for a new doctor. But I would say that was it was probably reflective of the first, uh, the first steps that I was taking, but like the first really serious steps.
yes. I'm sure that had to be difficult from a blogging perspective then, because you're trying to create content or, share recipes, and you're making changes, such
Yeah.
drastic changes to your own life.
Yeah, one thing about a clean bake, it really helped me keep myself honest and like
Mm,
stay on track, because the whole point of it was to share recipes that were in line with this new diet that
yeah.
I was kind of trying out. The problem arose when I would like eat something and then kind of get sick from it and go,
Yeah.
oh, I guess I can't eat beets now. It'd be like stuff I
Right.
didn't expect. I have a lot of weird food intolerances that like don't really make a ton of sense. It's so I did figure out kind of what was bothering me. And there's sort of like a whole period of recipes on the blog that are all like very low carb, sugar free, all this stuff. And that was really reflective of what my body could tolerate at the time. And then the more recent recipes on my site, they're still refined sugar free. They're still like fairly lower carb, I
Mhm.
call them. But you'll see like coconut sugar, and you'll see that I have been able to reintroduce a little bit more starch, a little bit more sugar, from like fruit and stuff like that I could never tolerate before.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I find that with my own blog as well. Like I have gone through different periods of different interests in certain foods, and so when I go back through and look at old posts, I'm just almost embarrassed. Like, oh my god, what was I thinking then? But you it's interesting to hear that other people, you have variations in the kinds of food that you're presenting.
Yeah, I think that's part of the appeal of a blog to me. It's sort of this um, log almost of the evolution of, whatever you're blogging about. In my
Yes.
case, my diet and my cooking skills, and
Yes.
this sort of journey to learn how to feed myself in a way that heals rather than makes me sicker.
Right.
That's not to say that I don't cringe when I see a lot of my older recipes. So
Oh, I can't
I'm
get over
totally right
how.
there with you.
Yes, I have so many old recipes that have like a ton of ingredients because I it's like there was a period I went through, and once I got past that period, my recipes all got better. But before that period, it was just like, I don't know, like I was just experimenting with all these different ingredients and I loved
Mm-hmm.
it and it was so much fun, but I feel bad for my readers, so I'm gonna have to go back and change all those old recipes.
I'm tempted to do the same, but I also look at websites like recipe sites that have been kind of like almost whitewashed,
Yeah.
and it bugs me a little bit. It's like that's not. I don't know. That's not what I came here to do. Like I like my site to be a little messy because it feels more authentic that way. I mean, assuming
Oh,
it's still a good recipe,
right.
I've taken down anything that's like legitimately a bad recipe.
Yes. Okay, so let's get into this because you
Okay.
reached out and you were describing. I love how you worded this. You created a process for downsizing your blog, and I want to get into what that meant for you. But I was hoping you could kind of describe that what caused you to make this decision.
So it was interesting. I sort of went through another, I would say, like, period of crisis after my son was born. And this
Mm,
time it wasn't like physical health, it was more mental health. I was just, I left my very high pressure consulting job when my son was born because I just didn't feel like it was something that would give me the lifestyle that I wanted. And,
mhm.
it wouldn't really allow me to be there for my son in the way that I wanted to ultimately. So I found myself without a job with this newborn that I'm not really a baby person. So I had no, and by that I mean, I did some babysitting growing up, but I'm not the kind of person who's like super confident with kids and like knows what to do around kids all the time.
Yeah.
Um, I'm pretty awkward around kids usually. So I was like, what do I do? And my husband went back to work and I was stuck at home, and I was like, I kind of felt like, okay, maybe this is my opportunity to do the blog. So I basically started freelance or trying to freelance more, started trying to build my blog into like a real business. And it was, a disaster because I had no real game plan and very little consistency. I had been doing it as a hobby up until that point, and it was making a little income. And I was posting twice a week, and it was like fine, but I didn't really have a strategy. I certainly didn't have any kind of business plan. Um, and I was trying to learn how to be a mother and start a business. And God, that was a bad plan. Like, so about 6 or 8 months in, I was just so overwhelmed, so feeling like such a failure. And, I just felt like this isn't working. Why isn't it working? Do I just want to shut this down and walk away from blogging? And I was just at this kind of like impasse where I was like, I think I want to keep doing this, but I'm failing and I don't really know how to succeed. So I need to kind of go back to the drawing board. So I did.
Wow, that's amazing. So you just had this revelation, like, you know what, things have got to be different, and I'm gonna call this my downsizing my blog moment.
Yeah, I wish it were quite that poetic. It was a period of like intense anxiety and self doubt
Yes,
and like minor depression and just
yes.
feeling like a total failure. And I think the thing that, like, in retrospect, I didn't really realize I was doing at the time, but I think that the best thing I did was I reframed my failure as basically like focus. I said, okay, I'm really bad at doing all these things myself. So I'm just going to zero in on the things that I'm good at and I enjoy doing about blogging. And I'm going to either outsource or just kind of like let go of these other things that have been causing me a lot of stress and angst and have been distracting me from the things that I enjoy and am good at about this work. So the things that were making me feel like a failure, I just kind of like realized that they weren't good for my business. And most of them I let go, a couple things I outsourced, but primarily I just decided this isn't what I'm going to do.
I kind of feel like, I don't know what kind of consulting you did, but I kind of feel like you sound to me like you turned on your consultant mode and said, okay,
Yeah. I mean, I think I did.
Nora,
yeah.
What should we do here?
So interestingly, my background is in brand strategy consulting.
Oh,
so
that's perfect.
It's funny that you say it like that because I guess I never really drew that direct link, but my background was I would always, I did market research and determined like what the brand's purpose was. And then, gave the brand some guidance on how to sort of zero in on their core offering and best meet their audience's needs.
Oh my God.
So I guess I basically did that for myself,
You did.
only like literally for myself. So for my brand, but like how my brand could best serve me and allow me to better serve my readers.
You know what I think is interesting is I can imagine that when you would walk in and tell brands these stories that they probably would be like, oh, we don't have time for this right now. And I'm thinking of this thing that we say in business oftentimes is that sometimes you have to go slower to go fast, to get faster. And the meaning of that is you can't just keep doing what you're doing and expect to get results. Sometimes you have to slow down and say, okay, what are we doing here that's working? What changes do we need to make? And so that way you can actually move in the right direction.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so many brands don't see that. They feel like we have to get faster. We have to get more diversified. We have to make sure we're doing absolutely everything our competitors are doing,
Yes.
or else we're somehow behind and never going to catch up. And my favorite like business idiom is you can't be all things to all people. And I sort of felt like that's what I was trying to do, like myself. I'm a one woman show over here, and I was trying to do recipe development and photography and writing and SEO and technical stuff and social media and video, and the list goes on and on and on beyond that. And I was losing my mind. Like I just felt like I was standing like in the middle of a circle with everyone like pelting me with rocks all the time because all the different demands were just competing for my time all the time. So I had to just stop. And I mean, I literally went back to the drawing board. I mean, the drawing board being like an empty Word doc. But I don't have an actual like drawing board. Just to be clear,
you need a whiteboard in your office.
Yeah. I mean, I went back to my like laptop whiteboard, and I asked myself, first of all, do I still want to do this? And it took a little bit of soul searching, but I realized, yes, I do. And then I realized I'm not sure I want to do this full time. So I actually, as part of my like blog business plan, I went back and got a full-time job. So this is now, I call it my professional hobby. I got a job that in many ways supports my blog work, and I did that on purpose. So I now have a remote job. So I work from home. I work 4 days a week, and Fridays are set aside for blogging. And I also work for a content marketing agency. So I run other people's blogs.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And we do, our focus is we produce content that's SEO optimized, obviously. So we do on-page SEO stuff, and I do a little bit of technical, not a ton, but I do, there's enough, I have enough exposure to the whole process that I kind of like understand it, and I get to stay up on blogging trends and SEO trends and things like that. So that was a huge part of the strategy that I developed. That took a lot of the pressure off, particularly the income pressure. And I'm now able to like let go of the things that I don't want to do or don't enjoy without any guilt, because I don't feel like I'm taking food out of my family's mouth. I don't feel like I'm going to make less income because I'm not doing video, because it doesn't matter. I have another income stream.
Right. You know what I love about this too is I feel like it speaks to every blogger who's out there that, I feel like oftentimes I look at my own content and I realize that I have been doing this too, where I don't have a plan. I'm like, oh, they're making chocolate covered pomegranate seeds. I'm going to do that too, or I can do that. And so I don't feel like I have had a plan as far as the content that I've placed on my site. So what I'm hearing from you is like this very mindful approach to going, what am I going to be? What am I doing here with this blog? And what kind of content am I going to share on it?
Exactly. So I would say that the three things I did that most significantly impacted my work or my plan or whatever you want to call it is I really thought about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for. So I think about who is benefiting from this, and what would they like. And that really helps me to resist the urge to like go down content rabbit holes that don't really serve me or my brand or my audience. The second thing that I did was worked very, very hard to kind of avoid, or at least like maybe not fully avoid, but resist the comparison trap, because I realized that was something that was really, really negatively affecting my business, my mentality, my like mental health, really, my confidence. It's a process, and I just want to be clear that all of this is an ongoing process. And I'm not like, I've nailed it, I'm perfect.
I've arrived.
Yeah, like I'm done, I'm great, guys. And then the third thing was I really realized how badly I was affected by perfectionism. And I think that this is something that a lot of bloggers grapple with. And I've had a lot of conversations with blogger friends where they're like, I have to do all this stuff and I have to do it all perfectly or else I'm failing. And it's like, it's not all or nothing. It's, first of all, it's an industry that we made up, guys. So like, just own it. Nobody can tell you how to do this right or wrong. But getting over that mindset, especially in the face of, social media and the comparison trap, is so difficult.
It is.
And for me, I'm just like, for better or worse, usually worse, a perfectionist by nature. And that's like not a humble brag. It's something that I really like struggle with. It's very hard for me. And it's been sort of an ongoing process for me to accept that, like, for example, if I don't do 2 posts a week, it's okay. The world's not going to come crashing down. My traffic's not going to plummet in a week, and my like blog isn't going to die in a week. It's been really a year-long process of like letting go of what I'm, quote, supposed to be doing in order to succeed. And being really flexible and learning to cut myself some slack and be realistic about what I have to give in a given day, and how much of that really deserves to go to my hobby, my professional hobby, and how much I really want, to be available for my family, and how much energy and focus I need for my job and stuff like that. So, anyway, so those are the 3 things that I think have made the biggest impact, and kept me on track and kept me honest, really, like kept me from starting to spiral back into like, I have to do everything all the time.
Oh, interesting. Because I think that's a great point to make, because I know we're going to get into some of the specific steps that you took during this, this downsizing period, but then these 3 things sound like they have also helped you with maintaining that, because it would be easy to slip right back into it.
Yeah. So I think that was like, I can't decide if it would be the how or the why, but that was sort of like at the next step in the pyramid of trying to figure out like how to get to where I ultimately wanted to go, which was to make my blog sustainable without sacrificing the quality or the growth potential, et cetera. so those three things took me a really, really long time to get to, and they're surprisingly hard to hold on to. I have to very consciously remind myself when I see something, for example, that like a competitor, I mean, I hate using that
I
term,
know.
but I'm
Another
sort of
blogger.
business minded.
Yes.
Another blogger who does similar content to me will do something and I'll be like, oh gosh, I really have to do that. Or I'll like look up the keyword and
Yes.
be like, oh my God, that's such a good keyword. And then
Yeah.
I just have to be like, well, wait a minute. Am I doing this because I'm excited about it? Is it something that my audience would like? Is it, am I staying true to myself? And do I really have the time to do this well? Or am I going to squeeze it in and make myself feel like I should be doing this and then get discouraged because I can't do a whole blog post in 2 hours? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And tell me what that means when you know, when you're talking about doing a blog post well, or I guess that means like what I'm trying to get at here is like what I have learned is not only do I want to present that recipe, but I want to be like I want to feel so confident about it so that if people have questions, I know how to answer that, not just like I just did that recipe and now I'm moving on and I don't really know, enough about the recipe to be able to answer those kind of questions. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. So, I was once in, like the Facebook groups we're all in.
Yes.
I was once in this thread where somebody was talking about like, how many times do you test a recipe?
Yes.
And I remember tons of people were saying, well, I just make it once and photograph it and then I post it. And maybe sometimes if it's a baked recipe or more complicated recipe, I'll test it a second time. And I had just come off of testing a cake 18
Oh
times.
my goodness.
And that made me so furious, Marley.
I
Oh my
bet.
God. This was like 2 years ago. And I still cannot let go of this because to me, it's a reflection of how, and like, I'm really sorry, but a lot of bloggers are putting up crap and they don't really know what they're doing. Like they have an area of expertise. I'm not saying they don't know anything, but a lot of people are tempted by, I don't know, keywords or what everyone else is doing. And so they put stuff up that they can't really stand behind. And I will completely admit that I have done the same thing.
Yeah, me too.
So I don't mean to throw anyone under the bus here, but I just say it to like encourage everybody to remember what your expertise is and stick to that. And that's really hard to do.
Yes.
Anyway,
Seth Godin talks about, how you want to leave behind something that you're really proud of. So that's what I try to keep focusing on is that, I want to leave something I'm really proud of, which means I want ownership of this. So it matters.
Yeah. So on my site, you'll see a lot of baked goods because that's what I feel like I am best at and have to offer. You won't see a lot of beef or pork recipes because I don't really know how to cook beef or pork very well, and I'm learning. And as I learn, I will share, but you'll see like 3 pork recipes, for example, because I don't want to present myself as an expert on something that I don't really know enough about to qualify as an expert. On the other hand, I just wrote I don't remember, like 2,000 word post about a smoothie because I've learned so much in the last 2 years of feeding a very, very picky child about how to like sneak nutrition in and how to make food as nutrient dense as possible and how to make things taste good and how to compromise with a very opinionated and very picky 2-year-old. So, I mean, that's sort of a silly example, but I try really hard to make sure that everything I'm sharing is a resource for people in addition to just being a straight up recipe. Some people like that, other people don't, but the people who like it really, really appreciate when I talk about like, these are finicky ingredients. Most of my baked recipes are almond flour based, and you can imagine like I don't know if you bake with almond flour a lot,
yeah.
but yeah, okay, I thought so, but didn't want to.
Yeah,
I didn't want to say something and be wrong. So how like a lot of packaging, in fact, will say like, oh, it's a perfect 1-to-1 substitute for flour, for wheat flour. And I'm like, oh my God, no.
Right.
So I go into a lot of detail. In fact, I have like entire posts on my site about baking with almond flour and how to select the right almond flour and what the difference between almond flour and almond meal is, which it turns out is 50% marketing and 50% kind of a marker for how finely ground it is. So things like that are really what I make a point to talk about in my posts. And if I can't share something valuable, I tend not to post the recipe, or I'll post it on, an Instagram story or something like that.
Oh, I love this. And, it's so much to think about at the same with all of the things that food bloggers are doing. But yet, the more I think you can be an expert in your field, like you say, and know your reader, know the questions they're going to be asking, I think the more you become a trusted go-to resource.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I feel like I can offer. And I just hope that I've earned people's trust by doing that. So it's really up to readers to decide.
Yeah. So let's go through some of the steps that you went through in your downsizing period. You talk
Sure.
about the fact that you decided to post less frequently.
Mm-hmm.
What did
I'm
that
not
look
sure.
like for you?
I would say that was like a half conscious decision and half just like
I see.
circumstantial.
Yes, right.
So I think it started out circumstantially. It basically, I had a young child and a new job, and I was trying to really balance it all. And it turns out that balance is really, really hard, as everyone knows, particularly if you're a working parent. So sometimes I just had to like let go of my posting plans. And it would be like 1 week and then the next week. And then maybe the next week I would get like one post up. And there were months where I posted once or maybe twice, down from like 8 to 10 posts a month previously. And that was at first really discouraging. And then I just kind of came to terms with the fact that I couldn't change that. I couldn't change my life or make more hours in the day or anything like that. So that's when it sort of pivoted to being more intentional. And I went back to having an editorial calendar, because at that point I was just posting like whatever I wanted.
Yes.
I had an editorial calendar in the past, but it was more like the next week, or I would just write down like what I had already photographed and scheduled, so I could just keep track of, like had it been submitted to Food Locker and all the sort of like after publishing stuff. I for the first time this year, I started creating like a more proactive editorial calendar and trying to be really realistic about what was going on in my life at a given time. So like in December, I just said, I'm posting twice. I mean, I completely disappeared in December because it was the holidays. We have several birthdays at the end of November and beginning of December. And we were also moving and traveling. December was crazy. So I feel like a year ago, I probably would have said, I'm still going to try to do it. Like I can't compromise, and I would have ended up planning and failing to produce 1 to 2 posts a week all month long, and putting a lot of pressure on myself to like post all these Christmas cookie recipes that I hadn't developed, and like just all this crazy perfectionism stuff that was not going to happen because of life, and really setting myself up for failure. So I decided the only way to make myself stop feeling like that was to dial back my publishing, but just make sure that every time I did publish, it was something really valuable and something that, as you said, I can really like stand behind and be proud of. So I kind of have like, I'm sort of speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I have a planned editorial calendar that I have, I usually plan about 3 months in advance. That's not to say
Right.
Nothing's done 3 months in advance, but I just have a roadmap. But then on the other hand, I give myself a lot of leeway to skip posts or move things around, or honestly just like be nicer to myself and let myself enjoy the process and not force myself to produce under really what's the word I'm looking for? Like unfortunate
Yeah.
circumstances. So I think that was like the biggest step that that was sort of the micro step that I took. And then the macro step was like also going back to this question of what am I trying to do here? So one thing that I did over the last year was I stopped posting savory recipes completely. Not everything, but like 90% of what I posted over the last year has been desserts because I really wanted to reestablish what I was here to do, which is primarily, not exclusively, but primarily baked goods and desserts.
Yes.
So oftentimes I would get these like, sort of whims like, oh, this great salad. And instead of being like, I have to publish this right away because it's in season and yada, yada, my audience wants it. I just wrote it down and, I have a recipe notebook like everybody. And I just have lots and lots of unpublished recipes there because I really wanted to get back to the core of what I was, of what kind of work I was doing for a clean bake. So I basically just like prohibited myself from posting for the sake of posting or posting if it wasn't a baked good or posting if it wasn't a really great baked good. So I'm really proud of everything that I posted, even though there was a lot less in terms of like volume.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like what you did post was, something that you had thoroughly researched and thoroughly tested and it fit in this category. I mean, it kind of makes sense that if your site's called a clean bake, that the things that you post would be baked goods. But
Baked, yeah,
I mean,
totally.
that said, I mean, I see lots of people who post, maybe have a site that sounds very baking or sweet oriented, and they have savory recipes as well. It's just, I can see when you're in a situation, especially where your time is limited, why not just stick to the core?
Exactly. And then the other thing I also started doing because I felt like it was a core part of my brand that I didn't represent very well was I started doing a lot more like editorial style. So,
Yeah.
I recently published a couple of sort of educational articles like what's the difference between paleo and keto and
I love
how
that.
to, eat healthier on a budget and stuff like that. I
Yes.
felt like that's legitimately something that I feel like I have a lot to offer. And I just wasn't, I was so busy like, oh no, I have to post a steak recipe because it's grilling season, but I have no idea how to cook steak very well. I can cook steak like two ways and they're both ready on the blog. So I started doing that, more editorial style content and focusing a lot more. When I didn't focus on dessert, I was focusing a lot more on like problem solving rather than just like, here's a steak recipe. So there's a lot of stuff about how to use your freezer to your advantage and how to meal prep without having to do like all of it on Sunday. Just sort of like, here are some tricks to make your week a little bit easier. Stuff like sticking to a budget.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot. This is more kind of on Instagram, but I do a lot on Instagram about how to throw together dinner really, really quickly. And that's sort of like a pet thing of mine because I now understand more than ever, but have always really like been challenged by getting a healthy meal on the table with like 30 seconds,
Yeah.
worth of prep time.
Yes.
So I've basically just been going back to like, what do I really feel good about, feel like I'm a relative expert in, and feel proud of. And if it doesn't pass that litmus test, I don't post it.
I love the idea of using Instagram too as a kind of a side project like that because I think about that too. If it's going to be a blog post that takes a lot more time, but you can use
Mhm.
Instagram to kind of scratch those other itches.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like I can get so much more content on Instagram than I can on the blog because it I mean, for me, these are just like my standards that I've
Yes.
established for my brand, but like I feel like it has to be a certain quality. Like, for example, I don't post pictures that I took with my phone on my blog.
Mhm.
Mostly because I'm not a very good iPhone photographer. um, so I know a lot of people who are phenomenal and can use their phone photos for their vlog, but so I can do stuff a lot faster, and I don't have to like
Sure.
edit, and I don't have to, do like the
Yes.
whole setup and stuff like that.
And you get that
So,
immediate feedback,
mhm.
audience response, which is nice too.
Yeah, I didn't really realize how many people were struggling with weeknight dinners. And the funny thing was, this is like, I hope you don't mind me totally pivoting the conversation now, but I have been working on a book proposal for about a year about like fast, healthy weeknight dinners. And I sort of like let it die a little bit. I mean, it's like half done, and I kind of abandoned it because I thought, oh, people have enough resources. They're not really struggling with this kind of thing anymore. Um, it turns out they are.
Yeah.
And and I love developing strategies for like getting healthy meals on the table. And I love sharing those strategies and helping people, feed themselves and their families better without stressing about it.
Well, you mentioned by
So,
email that you actually got a couple of cookbook deals, and part of your downsizing was to say no to those. Is that right?
yep. Yeah. Funny enough. So, 2 summers ago, so before when I was still freelancing, the first year of my son's life, or trying to freelance, I should say, I had always had this like dream that, one day I would just get this email out of the blue from an editor who was like, "We love your work. We want to publish your cookbook." And it actually happened.
Oh,
And I was like, "Oh my God, it's a miracle. This is some like the secret stuff." And as I got further into the conversation, we went back and forth for like a month or two. And it didn't feel right. And for a lot of reasons, the timing wasn't right. The project wasn't right. I'm not sure the partnership was right for me. And I ended up walking away. It was really hard to make that decision to walk away because I felt like, oh, I'm supposed to take this deal. I'm supposed to write a cookbook because that's how I know I'm succeeding as a blogger. But I never regretted it. I was so happy I walked away from that. And then it happened again with a different publisher.
wow.
And it felt like a better fit, but I still didn't feel right about it. The publisher was wonderful, very supportive. Um, it was definitely like on paper a much better situation, but I still didn't feel right about it in my gut. So I walked away from that one too, which like is the most obnoxiously privileged thing to say. So
No, I
I'm
think it
sorry.
sounds like, you're talking about being mindful. It definitely fits into that category of being mindful. We can't just take
Yeah.
on everything.
Well, yeah. So one of the issues for me has always been, particularly with blogging, is saying yes to everything and then realizing I can't do all this work for everybody, and do it all well.
Right.
So one of the major factors in my decision to walk away from these cookbooks was not feeling like I had the time and the bandwidth and like frankly the creative energy at that point in my life
Yeah.
to do it well, and knowing how much work would go into it and then like not being happy with it or proud of it. It seemed like a really bad decision to go ahead with it under those circumstances.
You,
Um,
earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that you kind of evaluated different tasks that you were doing and you decided to say no to some of those tasks. Can you describe what some of those were?
sure. And well, a big one was social media. And this is sort of related to the cookbook situation too, because one of the ways that publishers determine whether you're, um, whether you should write a book, and then like how much advance you get and how much marketing support you get, and basically like how valuable you are as an author, is your social media numbers.
Mm.
So I was hustling so hard to try to grow all my social media channels at once. I hated it. I was so miserable. I felt like it was this horrible game of whack-a-mole. And I wasn't doing a very good job. And once I gave up on writing a cookbook for the time being, and I should say, of course, I still want to write one. And of course, I still have this idea, this proposal kind of brewing. But right now, it feels so good to be off the hook on that, because I don't have to worry about my social media numbers. And that allowed me to totally give up pretty much completely on Facebook and Twitter. I enlisted a tool called Smarter Q. It's kind of like Edgar and,
Yes.
those other ones. And I loaded all of the posts on my site into this tool, categorized them, set up a schedule, and it's just been going for a year. I barely ever even look at Twitter,
Nice.
and very rarely look at Facebook unless I get a comment. That was such a load off my shoulders because I didn't have to worry about, like, if I don't use the Facebook scheduler, I won't get as much reach. And if I don't share other people's content, they won't share mine. And if I don't do video, that also then
Yes.
allowed me to not have to worry about doing video. It was just this domino effect where, like, there were all these things that were weighing on me, and giving up one thing allowed me to give up two or three other things, and, it kind of keep going down the line like that. So I gave up a regular posting schedule on social media. I still manually run my Instagram just because I really like Instagram. But I put Twitter and Facebook on, on automation. I still do Pinterest, but I outsource the management to a consultant. And I've more recently outsourced pin creation, like actually making the pins, to a designer that I work with. And I'm trying to think what else I kind of gave up on. I mean, mostly it was like the way that I'm kind of running my blog.
Yeah.
So doing less work and focusing more on quality over quantity. So, like I said, fewer posts. I actually do fewer pictures per post, and I do less styling in each photo shoot. I actually downsized my photo process substantially. I used to have 2 humongous bookshelves full of props.
Yeah.
I got rid of about a third of them. I put most of the remaining ones in storage when we moved. And now I just have 2 little underbed boxes full of props, and that's all I have to work with. Those are all my props. I got rid of half my boards. I stopped freelancing, which allowed me to stop holding on to all these props that weren't really my style, because I was holding on to all these dark surfaces and dark props that I thought would be good fit, might be a good fit for a future client's style, but I don't have clients anymore. So that allowed me to really focus in on the style that I like and work on practicing and, developing that style and feeling more confident and more creatively fulfilled by that style. Like I said, I gave up on a set schedule. So I have a planned schedule, but I don't always meet it. And I've given myself permission to just kind of go with the flow a little bit and be confident in my own, motivation, I guess.
Yes.
That I will get posts up this month, even if I don't get 2 up this week. I can get 1 up next week and then pick up 2 the following week or something.
What about working with brands?
So I stopped working with brands unless they reach out to me and they're a brand that I already like. So that has left very few opportunities for me. I get a lot of cold emails, but I've stopped pitching, and I don't really respond to cold emails unless it's a brand I already use in my house. I think I did 2 sponsored posts last year, but I also increased my rates so substantially that I made more money doing 2 posts than I did the previous year doing 5 posts.
Wow.
So I also stopped working with those agencies,
Yes.
what are they called? Tap Influence and those, because I felt like they weren't offering I don't want to say they're not offering a fair wage. They are. They're just not offering the wage that I need in order to justify using my tiny amount of spare time to do a sponsored post.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
so I kind of just brought it down to bare bones again.
I'm sure everybody's curious at this point to hear, all these changes that you made and what kind of impact did that have on your blog, actually?
Actually, a really positive one, believe it or not.
That's great.
So I've never done very well on social media. So my social media numbers have been pretty flat. My Instagram has grown really substantially because that's where I put my energy and I'm like genuinely excited about it. But my Facebook has barely grown in a year. My Twitter has barely grown in the whole time I've been on Twitter. My Pinterest, Pinterest in the last
Yes.
year has been really messing with their algorithm. So I still participate in Pinterest, but my traffic is pretty flat. My incoming traffic, but my SEO. So SEO is something that I started investing in a couple of years ago, and like really really heavily. And my search traffic is up. I think I looked it up last month. My January search traffic this year is up 187% over January of last
Wow,
year.
that's amazing.
So yeah, it's really exciting because I've invested all of the energy and time that I saved from giving up all of this stuff that I've been talking.
Yes.
I think probably the question is like, well, what have you been doing? What I have been doing is SEO, and focusing on optimizing my site and producing the best content that I can, because that's what Google likes to see. They like to see something that's informative and shareable and keeps people on the page, keeps them reading. And it's not just some, like the sort of stereotypical
Yeah.
like food blog post where it's like, and then I went, on a date night with my husband,
Yes.
and here's a minestrone soup recipe.
Yes.
Like,
Exactly.
Google doesn't like that. Like, I know there's definitely an argument to be made, and I fully agree with the argument that like it's a personal blog, like you're allowed to talk about yourself and your own life.
Sure.
But there is a trade-off.
Right.
The more you're gearing your post toward your reader and their need, the more they're going to be engaged and come back and share your post and et cetera, all the metrics that Google
Well, I think it goes
likes.
down to like if you're doing this as a hobby, then go ahead and just write about that dinner date. But if you want to turn this into an income and be professional with it, then you do kind of have to start thinking about the person who's reading it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you want to talk about the dinner date and you want to have a professional blog, talk about the dinner date, but don't make that the
The
whole
focus.
editorial component
Yes.
of the post. So I've been, this was actually like, I don't want to sound like callous. I didn't intentionally take myself out of my blog. I'm actually a lot more comfortable educating people and talking about, the nutrition or the health
Yeah.
benefit or whatever than talking. I don't like talking about myself, which is a funny thing to say in a podcast interview. Um, but in the blog context, I don't really feel like I have a lot to share about myself. My life isn't really any more interesting than the person reading. So I just feel like I have more to say, and more to offer if I take the route of like, here's some information and here's some tips about the recipe and here's some troubleshooting tips. So I've been really focusing on optimizing the blog, like technically, but also the on page content for SEO, and that's really been paying off. And then the other thing that I've really been focused on is, since I made the pretty conscious decision to step away from both freelance and sponsored work, the only revenue stream still available to me is, not the only, but like the only,
Yeah.
common one is advertising. So I pretty much turned my blog over to my ad agency and I said, or ad network, and said like, do what you're going to do,
Yes.
and they optimized my ad placements or whatever,
Right.
they did their thing, to not fully maximize my income, but
Yeah.
I feel like I found a really good sweet spot between maximizing the income potential without it being just totally plastered with ads. So I was able to, despite doing less income generating work and generally speaking, posting less, I've been able to more than double my monthly ad income on average.
That's amazing. That's gotta
So
feel
yeah,
so good.
it's kind of mind blowing. Like when I go back, I think one of the really important things to do for any blogger is to go back and compare yourself
To yourself.
to a year ago, 2 years
Yeah.
ago, totally. Because otherwise, you look at all these other blogs, there's always somebody who's like posting more, or has more traffic, or has more
Yes,
Instagram followers.
exactly.
And it's so easy to get lost in feeling inadequate. And really, the only person that you should be competing with is yourself. Like, has my quality improved? Have my skills improved? Has my traffic improved? And even if it hasn't, like, even if your traffic hasn't improved, if your quality, like if your photos have improved and you started this because you love food photography, that's awesome. You're
Yes.
killing it. So I really try to look back at my own metrics as often as like reasonably possible. I don't do it like every day, but I do try to really compare myself to, for example, like last year and then the year before when I had very different business models. And by all metrics, I'm like absolutely light years ahead of where I was by all metrics that I care about, I should
Yes,
say. I wish I
exactly.
was getting a little more traffic from Pinterest, but I guess don't we all?
That's right. If we could figure that one out, then
Mhm.
that would be
Yeah,
amazing.
totally.
It's like you get it
Yeah.
figured out and then they change everything anyway.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was the other thing I kind of gave up on, like Facebook and I mean, even Google, but primarily like the social networks, they rip the rug out from under us
So many
all
times.
the time.
Yes.
And I keep up with the important stuff. Like I don't make super long skyscraper pins
Yeah.
anymore. Um, but I don't like to play the games. I mean, I just don't like have the time for that. So when they change the algorithm and, for example, Facebook now wants long form, like 3 minute, like cooking show style videos. And I'm like, I don't have the time or the skills for this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Yes.
So I, I wish I had the time and the skills and the like staff to be able to pull all these things off, but I just don't. So I don't really, I don't have the option really to participate in all of the different like changing like whims of the social networks.
Well, it'd be one thing if when they're making those changes that it made things better. But for me personally, when I'm going through Pinterest, I don't really enjoy the experience anymore. It's not as beautiful as it used to be. To me, Pinterest used to be a beautiful experience, and now it feels kind of like I don't know. I don't like the smart feed, I'll be honest.
I'm with
Yeah.
you. It feels very depersonalized
Yes.
and to me, it feels like they're serving their own needs. And I used to use Pinterest for fun all
Me
the
too.
time. And I don't go on it anymore because it's too
Yeah.
messy.
Messy is a perfect word. It feels very messy. Whereas when I'm on Instagram, everything just looks beautiful.
I know. I love Instagram.
I did not get Instagram for a long time, but it's like something happened and then I got it. And it's like, it's like,
You
remember
can
those
never go
photos that you used
back.
to look at? And if you stared at it long enough, like some other image would come out. That's
Hmm.
exactly what happened with me and
Yeah.
Instagram.
I was a little late to the
Me too.
Instagram party as well, but I'm with you. It's like it sucks you in. If you're a photographer, anybody else who's like visually, sort of inspired, Instagram, like nothing beats
Oh,
Instagram. It's so wonderful. And obviously it has its
sure.
quirks and we have our frustration. We as, content creators have our frustrations, but oh, it's so fun to just scroll through
It
it.
is. And I have 1,000 different living rooms I want to do in my house thanks to
I know.
Instagram.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I love how you said in the email that you just felt like it's so easy as bloggers to be distracted by all these external messages, but that you went through this period of this experience with yourself, and it helped you to stop thinking about all that and really to kind of focus on your own unique site and that kind of growth that you wanted to go through. I just love that statement.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It took me a really long time to get there for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's a hard process, and it's one that I don't want to sound like I said earlier, I don't want to sound like, oh, I've got it all figured out. It is a process. It's an ongoing one.
Exactly. So what I heard you say though is that at some point you started doing these things and you moved forward. You
Mhm.
don't have any intention of like going back to old content and and doing anything with that. You're going to leave it as it is.
Um, yes and no. So I've gone through all my old content, and I'm like, I actually, make the recipes on, I mean, I'm sure you probably do too. Like, I'll go back to my old recipes and actually remake
Yeah,
them. I sort of use my blog as my personal
me too.
cookbook. And so I inadvertently retest recipes and go, "Ooh, that needs a little tweak." So
Yes.
I'm constantly sort of trying to improve things. Um, I really enjoy in certain contexts, either redoing the recipes or redoing the photos or both when it's something that like I know this recipe could be better, or I know it's a great recipe. It just doesn't look as good because I didn't have the photo skills or,
Right.
expertise back then. Um, so I don't, I don't not change old posts, and I certainly don't recommend that to other people. I go back and I optimize posts for keywords, but I don't like I don't I don't like I said, kind of whitewash. I don't take down every post that looks kind of amateurish. I do take down posts that the recipe is genuinely like confusing or weird or bad because it's so old. I should mention, I ported over some of my recipes from my old conventional baking blog because I had a few that were sort of in the realm of, they were like gluten free or something like that. And a lot of those are just like, oh, geez, I had no idea what I was doing back then,
Yeah.
when I was just starting to sort of explore without diving in to the gluten free and everything else free diet lifestyle. So I have taken a couple of those down.
When you say take them down, do you mean you deleted them?
Yeah, I completely. I revert them to
Yeah,
drafts
me
so
too.
that they're still on my
Yeah.
site, and I can go back to them, and maybe someday I can, tweak them and improve them. But I take them take them down and redirect that link so that it
Yes.
goes back to the homepage or something. Um, anyway, so I do kind of toe the line between making my content work as hard for me as possible, my existing content, and staying true to kind of where I was at that point. So there are very few posts. I have done it for a couple, but like less than 5 posts that I've actually started from scratch and like wiped the editorial, wiped the photos, totally rewritten it and totally rephotographed. Most of them, it's like I'll just add some useful information to the post, but keep the personal stuff there. Because I used to write a lot more like about what was going on in my life, and stuff like that. Um, or I'll update the photos or something like that. But don't I don't often totally wipe the post and like start fresh. And if I do, I repost it as as if it were an entirely new post. I don't kind of keep it like as a historical post, but with modern,
Yeah,
content. You know what I'm
I
trying to
do.
say?
So do you think that moving forward, now that you kind of, I don't know if it's stumbled upon or you landed upon this plan, do you anticipate that this would be the way you move forward, or do you have thoughts about how things will be this year?
So the difference between this year and last year was last year I kind of had to like um I had to really go back to basics to see what worked and almost like stress test this business plan. And I think it worked really well. I don't anticipate, for example, that like from this year to next year, I'll double my ad income again using this strategy. I feel like I've sort of like maxed out the growth, or, close to maxed out the growth that I can, um, that I can get from this strategy. So I'm very carefully, and very sort of gradually expanding, this year. And the things that I'm most of the things that I'm reintegrating back into my strategy are things that I'm outsourcing. So like I said, I've hired somebody to do a lot of pins for me. I am kind of auditioning a woman to do video on a very limited basis because as much as I don't like it, I think that it is important and it is something that I can't really ignore for that much longer. And then I've been talking to a friend of mine about helping me with some VA work. Over the years, I've tried several VAs and they haven't worked out for various reasons. And this is somebody that I really trust and she knows her stuff. And I could really use some help tackling a lot of like technical fixes, things like making sure recipe cards are optimized and things like that. And I'm a really, really firm believer in making sure that all of your old content is working as hard as it possibly can for you. So making sure that it's like the site itself is fully optimized for search. Those are things that I'm now willing and like able to sort of tackle. And then the other thing that I'm trying to do is make sure that all of my posts going forward, with a few exceptions, but like 90% of my posts going forward are optimized for search for a good and a relevant keyword so that I can continue to build authority for my site and continue to take advantage of ranking improvements and the traffic that brings.
Sounds like it's going to be a fun year.
I hope so. Yes. Or a very good learning experience.
Exactly. Well, I love to ask these questions at the end of the interview. Are you game for that?
Totally.
Okay, let's do it. Tell me about one of your favorite foods.
I think it would have to be a cross between potatoes and chocolate. Not together. Not together.
There's a lot of things I like to put chocolate on, but not potatoes.
No.
Although I have seen chocolate-covered potatoes.
Chocolate-covered potatoes.
Yes, you knew where I was going, didn't you?
Never tried them, but yeah, that would be probably perfect for me. I really, something like happened to my brain when I was pregnant, and I never really had any, opinions about potatoes before, but they were the only thing I could eat when I was pregnant. Wow. And I have remained completely obsessed with any kind of like crispy, salty potato. Fries, roasted, chips, you name it, I'm there. And then chocolate, because chocolate, like super dark chocolate, I could eat it all day.
I love it. Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of dark chocolate. It took me a long time to get used to it, but once I got there, it's like I can't even eat milk chocolate anymore.
Oh, I'm totally the same way. Yes.
It's so good.
People think I'm crazy. So I'm really, that's really heartwarming that someone understands.
Exactly. Okay. So what's the favorite app on your phone?
I mean, everybody says Instagram, so I'm not going to say Instagram.
Okay, good.
Actually, this is sort of like a love-hate relationship, but I have the Trulia app. Trulia is like the real estate site.
Yes.
So one thing we were talking about before we started recording was that my husband and I just sold our condo and we're living in an apartment for sort of a somewhat temporary amount of time while we're looking for our next house. And we haven't found one yet. And we're just looking, and I'm constantly checking Trulia to see like what's come on the market. Has there been any like really amazing house that we just like can't wait to see and it's like magically in our price range? So I like it, but it's also like kind of frustrating. But of course also Instagram.
It's a great app. I mean, even if you just go buy a house and it's for sale, you can look it up and see how much it is. It's kind of nice.
I know. I love real estate. So I love just sort of like seeing what's, the inside of houses that I see for sale and stuff.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It really is. It's kind of, I don't know, like it's kind of addictive.
It is.
I hate to say it that way, but it's like, I always want to, I really am interested in like what the latest decorating trends are and things like that. I have no skills of my own, but I like seeing what other people are doing.
Well, and think about how much time that app saves you, because you can actually just see inside the house now. You don't have to call your agent and get inside.
Right, exactly. So it's really fun to just sort of like browse, and it's like window shopping for houses.
Yes, it is like window shopping. The trick is though, once you buy your house, you have to stop looking because otherwise you're going to be like, oh, why did we buy this one?
I know. And right now we're sort of like taking a break from looking while we sell our place and then just sort of like recover from selling our place.
Yes.
So I'm like, I'm like, Brian, stop looking at Trulia. You're tempting us too much. But I look at it too.
One thing at a time. That's right.
Yeah.
Do you have any time for TV at all or reading? And if so, what's your favorite?
I don't like intentionally watch a lot of TV. And by that, I mean, I don't really like sit and pay attention. I watch stuff in the background while I'm cooking or doing dishes or something. And usually it's one of the like 4 shows on Netflix that I watch over and over again. Usually it's Parks and Recreation, to be completely honest.
Yes.
But I have been making a lot more time for reading. And I just read this absolutely phenomenal book about how the White House residence is run. Huh. I've been reading exclusively books about politics, government, or related topics. I don't know what's come over me. But this book was called The Residence, I think. It was so interesting. It was one of those, like, you know, those books that you just can't wait to finish because you're losing so much sleep over them. Like you're just staying up an hour past your bedtime every single night to keep reading. Wow. It was one of those.
It must be a really good book to make that topic that interesting.
Oh my God. It was so fascinating. I'm really interested in, you know, like the government and stuff like that. So it was sort of this interesting, like, inside look at what it's like to be president through a lens that you don't really think about a lot, which is, you know, what your personal life is like when you live at the White House.
I did read about that a little bit in Michelle Obama's book on Becoming, where she talked about how, you know, like she couldn't even hardly reach into a cabinet without somebody, you know, there. And I think that would be, she sounded relieved to be past that. Let me just say that.
Yeah. And this book, The Residence, was, it was written by a journalist who compiled hours and hours and hours of interviews with different White House employees, past and present. And so some of them had worked or currently worked during the Obama administration. And had meaning like they had either retired, but had been there for part of it, you know, anyway. So they said like the Obamas were some of the most uncomfortable with all the, you know, the helpers being around. The fuss, they were just very uncomfortable with it. And they had come on the tail end of a series of families who were like very privileged and probably a lot more accustomed to having help in the home on a sort of permanent basis. And the Obamas were just kind of like, we're used to washing our own dishes. I would be the same way.
Too.
I remember I felt the same way when I read that part of Michelle's book. I say Michelle like
she's a friend. Yeah.
Buds.
She'll be on.
Yeah.
She'll be joining us soon. So yeah.
Yeah. She lives down the street. Yeah. I mean, she kind of does.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a very, very long way down the street. But that was part of my, White House binge was also, I read Michelle's book, back around Christmas.
Such a good book.
Oh, it was so good. Oh my gosh. I just want to be friends with her.
I want to too.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? That's right. She just seems like a very friend, like she could be your friend. Like the way she talked in that book was so, I loved it.
I loved how she was able to both sound very intelligent and educated, but at no point do you feel like she's talking down to you. She's so down to earth and she's so like friendly and warm and approachable without sounding like she had to like dumb herself down, which, you know, it's hard to do that. You know, it's hard to sound intelligent and not patronizing.
It's so true. And it's a voice. I mean, honestly, when you were saying that, it made me think this is the voice I would love to have on my blog. That would be perfect. I just have to embody Michelle Obama as I write.
Channel Michelle as you write.
That's right. Channel her. So tell me, how can people find you online?
Well, my website, obviously, is the easiest place to find me, acleanbake.com. It's like a clean break, but bake instead of break. You can email me, Nora@acleanbake.com. Or you can find me through one of the social media channels that I don't use, or I would recommend finding me through the social media channel that I do use, which is Instagram. And my handle there is Nora_a clean bake.
Was a clean bake?
I wouldn't suggest trying to find me on Facebook or Twitter.
Was a clean bake already taken on Instagram?
No, I own that too. Actually, I converted my personal account over to my, business, my blog account, and I didn't want to lose the personal aspect of it. So I ended up, I own a clean bake, like just a clean bake. And if you go to it, the description just says like, there's nothing to see here. Go to Nora _a clean bake.
It's always hard to know which one, how to do that. I see some people who mix personal with their business and others who keep it really separate. So it's hard to know.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to sort of keep the personal touch and not, I knew that at the time when I switched it over and I started investing more in blog marketing through all my social channels, but my Instagram channel specifically, I knew that the majority of my followers at the time were friends. And so I didn't want them to see this like strange, impersonal name in their feed, all of a sudden, and see these like, pieces of cake. Like there was no face, and then there would be no name. And I didn't want to alienate my friends really.
Yes, exactly. I love it. Nora, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you. I did too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to Nora Schlesinger for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Wasn't that amazing? I told you, I knew it was going to be insightful discussion, and I hope you loved it. I encourage you to listen to it again, and maybe even again if you need to. There are certain areas of any particular episode that I might go back and listen to over and over just because I really want to soak it in. I highly recommend that. And you can also go to chopped.academy for the show notes page where I've got some more details if you want to check some things out. While you're there, be sure to sign up for the Chopped Academy newsletter. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast. I've gotten so many emails and shares on social media and just personal notes from you all, just letting me know how much this podcast means to you. And I can't tell you enough how much I love hearing from you. Please, if you have a moment where you're thinking, I love this podcast, it's really made a difference for me, send me a note. I would love to hear from you. Of course, podcast reviews on iTunes and Stitcher is the life and breath of a podcast. It really helps this show so much. So please take a few moments to head over to iTunes and leave a review today. You inspire me, and I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.